Hi, and welcome to another edition of Danny Brown Talks Phoenix. I am your host, Danny Brown, and today I am joined by Jay Josephs. He is the founder and chief review appraiser of, and I will stop there and let you kind of take over because your companies have kind of switched around a little bit here.
Yes. So I'm the owner, founder of a company called Josephs Appraisal Group, which is a more conventional appraisal company, commercial and residential throughout Arizona. I founded with two partners a company called Value Trend Solutions, known as VTS. And approximately 10 months ago, we merged with a company called Apex, Apex Appraisal Management. And I think between the two of us, we're a top 10 in the nation appraisal management company. So it's been a really positive merger, and it's nice to have great resources behind us.
Yeah, so I mean, that really kind of takes you into the big leagues and probably gives you a lot more credibility and resources that you wouldn't otherwise have.
Yeah, we get in the door with companies that maybe when it was just VTS, which was a little more of a regional player, we weren't getting in there. So it's kind of nice, and the owners are great, and everyone's on the same page and moving in a really positive direction, and couldn't be happier.
Good. Well, congratulations on that. That sounds really fantastic. So how did you get into this? How did you become an appraiser?
Well, so out of college, I was failing miserably at two things, and that was mortgage banking and real estate sales. So for the record, Danny, I have a great appreciation for the success you have.
Oh, well, thank you.
Because I couldn't obtain that in your business. It would have been nice to do that. And I was just working two jobs, and I got a call from a friend's dad who said, "You want to be an appraiser?" I'm like, sure. I was having struggle coming up with money for any coin, any drink night, so I was ready for anything. And that was it. And second or third month in, I was the number 2 producer in a 10-person appraisal shop.
Wow.
And I realized it really suited my skill set, which was I'm an incredibly efficient thinker, and it helps because in this business, unlike your business where you might work your butt off for a client and then they decide not to buy or buy with someone else and you get nothing for it. In appraising, it is fully the harder you work, the more efficient you work, the more you make. So it's been a really nice move for me.
Very nice. Well, that's a great story. It's kind of similar to my own and how I got into real estate.
How did that happen?
Well, I was in banking for a long time in corporate America, and then I had switched around between a couple of different banks thinking it was the bank that I didn't like, and it turned out it was just corporate America that I didn't like.
Totally get it.
So I bartended for a year to try and figure out what I wanted to be when I grew up, and I explored insurance, and then a friend, he asked me if I wanted to get into real estate, and I said sure. And haven't really looked back since.
Good for you.
Yeah, and it's really kind of fit my personality type as well. And it's funny, I actually look back on it, and every corporate job I've had, I have been let go of. Except one, I quit. Okay. But I'm pretty sure that had I not quit, they were probably going to let me go. So the corporate world just does not fit, my personality type at all. So.
Well, from my perspective outside looking in, like, you bring a high level of professionalism to an industry that could use it and needs it, and it's super impressive. So congratulations on for both of us finding the right careers for us, for sure.
Well, for appraisers, the bar is set very high. I mean, the training and the things that you have to go through is super in depth and takes a long time versus real estate. I mean, my biggest gripe about residential real estate is the bar is super low.
Barriers to entry aren't significant enough.
Yeah.
You agree?
Yeah. Okay. Oh, absolutely. I wish it cost more money on an annual basis for licensing, and I wish that it was a lot more than 90 credit hours to get a real estate license.
Right. And so on the appraisal side, I think what allowed me to thrive in the industry, besides I think I'm good at this, is that I'm professional and I think I'm user-friendly. Mm-hmm. And you probably have run across this. That's not all appraisers.
No,
a lot of appraisers look at these interactions with realtors and homeowners as like a burden.
Yes.
Like, just leave me alone, let me do my job. And I never looked at it that way. I looked at it, I want you to gain confidence in me, and I want you to feel comfortable that I'm the right person for this job. So to a certain extent, inspections are a little bit like interviews to me, because I want you to walk away saying to your clients, hey, I'm confident we got the right guy for this assignment. In terms of barriers to get into the profession, it used to be a 2 to 2.5 year process. That's a lot of work to become an appraiser. There is a trend in this industry because appraisers are aging out. The average age of appraisers is now up to like 57, 58 years old from what I understand. And so they're trying to get new blood in. And so now you can get a license in about 6 months.
Okay.
You can get certified, I think, in about a year. That all being said, I don't know why anyone would want to join this profession because on the other side, the powers that be are reducing the need for appraisals.
Sure.
You're going to see more and more transactions where they're going to be like, your credit's good, the computer says it's a fair price. Yeah, let's skip the appraisal.
It's so funny that you say that because I'm already seeing it happen in real time. We've probably had 5 in the last 3 or 4 months where we don't need an appraisal. And it's like, really?
Right.
Like,
Hopefully the camera can't see the tears I'm shedding right now. But everything's about streamlining the process.
Sure.
And when you look at a mortgage process, a large portion of that is encumbered by the appraisal and the fees associated with the appraisals. And so we're looked at as the fat. And I think there's lending industry people that think a computer can do it better than me.
Oh, I know exactly how that feels.
Yeah, we're both facing technology really eating into our business. And so the first wave, besides the fact that you're seeing appraisal waivers now, there's an alarming trend called bifurcated appraisals. Have you heard of this? Where they're going to send non-appraisers and non-real estate people out to do the inspections for appraisers, thinking that the appraiser will be more efficient if they're sitting at their desk just looking at the pictures that come in. There's companies out there that are hiring Uber drivers to do appraisal inspections. And I think it's a terrible trend.
It is terrible.
But they're trying anything to cut the cost, cut the time. So I don't even know what your question was, but that's
well,
where
I think we kind of jumped into the middle of a conversation. So I kind of want to rewind and just start at the basics, and then we can kind of catch up to where we're at now.
Right.
But so for the audience, let's just start. What is an appraisal?
Fair question. So it's a neutral, objective, professional opinion of value. And there's a process to it.
Sure.
Like I can't, if you call me up and say, hey, what do you think this house is worth? I can't just tell you I think it's worth $150,000 or $500 or whatever, because I'm doing an appraisal. And when I give a value, there's a bundle of things I have to do that go along with it. But effectively, it should be neutral, it should be objective, and it should be professional, meaning the appraiser meets their uniform standards of practice and care.
And why would somebody need an appraisal?
A variety of reasons. Typically and traditionally, it's the lender wanting to feel comfortable with their collateral. When you apply for a loan, they're going to do all their research to make sure that you're a good risk, you're a low risk, that you're not going to default, but then it's also the collateral. And so we're there to ensure for the lender that the collateral is worth what people think it is.
So I would argue that then appraisers, do you think appraisers can stall the free market? Because I am of the opinion that something is worth what someone is willing to pay for.
Right. I've heard this a million times.
I'm sure you have.
And if I agreed with you, I would probably not be around doing this much longer.
Well, I mean, but give me a reason why that's a flawed statement. Because I do think that there's value to having that done, and you can't just let you have to have constraints around a free market.
So there's things you have to consider. One, sometimes you get like kind of a microscopic like frenzy going on. And what I mean, in a specific circumstance, there might be one property available and there might be 6 people wanting that property. And then that artificially sends the market really high. Well, what happens if they close on that? They don't get an appraisal and they close super high, and then 6 more properties go on the market. what probably happens is now we're not in that situation where there's no supply and the lender's overexposed because now there's 6 properties and there's not that euphoric, I got to buy this, I have to buy this, like I'm buying a puppy at an auction. So there's those circumstances where I don't agree with you. And then the other thing, and we see this kind of regularly, we're basing market value on typical seller motivations, but also typical buyer circumstances. Like the buyers are educated and they have a fair understanding of what's going on. And no offense, Danny, to you, but to your industry, sometimes realtors aren't great about giving buyers all the information they need to make an educated decision.
They're terrible at it, actually.
Right. So I had one, I won't go into all the details, but these people paid way too much for their house. And after the fact, I was talking to them and we were trying to figure out what happened. And their agent, I said, did they run comps for you? And his response was enlightening to me. No, he didn't run sales, but he ran listings. That's an uneducated buyer to me.
Yes.
And so I think the contract matters, and I think the contract means something, and I think most appraisers consider the contract as they're going through their process. But ultimately, we're basing our opinions on a typical buyer, typical seller, typical circumstances, and the contracts are not always typical buyer and typical circumstances. So
very true.
Yeah.
And I don't think you touched on it, but I also think it has to do with the fact that you're using someone else's money to buy something.
Yep.
And that someone else wants to make sure that you're not an idiot and overpaying for something, right?
Totally fair.
If you're using all your own money, pay whatever you want. But when you're borrowing it from somebody else, they want to do their due diligence to make sure that you're a good investment.
Yeah. You might, again, I emphasize this a lot. I care about the typical buyer. I've appraised houses that have 30-car garages, and they might have cost $250,000 or something to build. And I understand for a specific buyer, that might have full value.
Yeah.
My appraisals for the typical buyer who might look at that and say, okay, that's kind of cool. I've got 4 cars, but what am I going to do with the rest of them? And you might have a specific buyer who loves green carpet. I don't know. And so for that buyer, maybe they care, or they need 6 bedrooms. Most buyers don't need 6 bedrooms. And so you're right that while each buyer is making a decision based on their own standards and their own preferences, we want a uniform standard, and it's a standard that protects the lender. So Danny, I'm really glad you brought that up. That's a good point.
So I've always had the question, if it truly is supposed to be a neutral valuation of the home, why do appraisers go into it knowing what the contract price is?
It's a great question. So we've had multiple industry changes, industry shifts. And I thought one of the last industry shifts, they were going to make it so the appraiser never received a copy of the contract. And if you really want neutral and objective appraisals, don't give them the contract.
Yeah.
And I think the reality is the lending industry realized that they don't have enough control over you to make sure that you wouldn't be giving that information to the appraiser anyway.
Oh.
And so I think they decided, well, if we can't comfortably believe that no appraiser is getting a copy of the contract, we're going to go the other direction and say we want you to really analyze it. But I do say this, that there's one single document on the face of the earth that influences appraisers more than anyone else, and that's the purchase contract. And if the appraiser didn't have the contract, I think you'd see more deals blown, because there's those circumstances. There's some circumstances where you might be an escort $355,000, and when I'm sitting there trying to come up with my final number, my range is $345,000 to $355,000. If I don't know the contract, I probably come in at $350,000.
Sure.
But $355,000 is within my comfort level, within my range. It's not an exact science, and so us having a copy of the contract,
it's almost like having a standard deviation. Like it allows for a little room for error. So if you're under contract, like you said, let's just say 292, but you didn't know that, and you're like, oh, this is looks like 290. All of a sudden you could have a blown deal.
Absolutely. So here's something, and I just heard this recently in Australia, and I hope I'm not getting this wrong. They do appraisals completely different. They have this crazy technology that basically by the time you're done with the appraisal, the technology's filling in your form for you, which is really cool. But one of the things I'm told they do, they don't give the contract to the appraiser, but then when the appraisal's done, they have, and I could be wrong on the number, but a 3% deviation. So if I appraised it at $295,000. I don't know the contract price. The contract price is $300,000. It'll round up to the contract price. So then you're getting a neutral opinion with a deviation, which it would be revolutionary if we did that in the United States.
Yeah.
But I think it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense too. Because I mean, we do a lot to try and make sure that appraisals come out the way we kind of want them to.
Right.
But we've had experiences where we're representing the buyer and don't necessarily have direct contact with the appraiser, and then all of a sudden we get it back and it's $1,500 off. And it's like,
I hate that.
Seriously?
I hate that.
I've got to go back now and deal with this for $1,500. Are you kidding?
Totally get it. Yeah, that 3% deviation would, again, the goal is neutral and objective appraisals. Then let's not give the appraiser the contract, but let's allow the market to naturally evolve, and you do that with that 3% deviation. Because what you don't want as a lender is you don't want this. I understand you want to be able to appraise in a market that's gradually going up like this, but as a lender, you don't want the spike, because what usually happens after the spike is the down.
The down.
And you don't want to be the lender lending up here. So, but I think we have a ways to go as an industry, and I think the decisions they're making now with this, having non-appraisers do the inspections, is a terrible idea.
I think that's a terrible idea too. I mean, I do a lot of due diligence for our clients in terms of when we're taking a listing. The first thing I do is I look at photos and familiarize myself with the neighborhood and the area. But you don't really get a sense or the flow of a home unless you're standing in it and you see it in person. So I do the same thing when I'm comping out a house. I come in with a range, and I've got comps that are somewhat on the low end and somewhat on the high end, because I'm kind of going in blind.
Yep.
And then when I'm sitting there in their dining room, having viewed their home, I'm able to kind of better figure out what their value is. And I think you lose that if you're sending in an Uber driver to walk a property for you. That's just...
Absolutely. How many buyers have you had that said, I don't really need to see the house, let's just make an offer? None, really, unless it's a crazy circumstance where they're out of town and this is going
we've got out-of-state clients, but even with out-of-state clients, we go to the home for them, and we film it, walking through the property, narrating the video with it's not high production. We don't have, Rensler come in and do this for us, but we walk through with our cell phones and we video it, and we do close-ups of things that we think they should pay attention to, stains, cracks, whatever. So we've had several clients who are out of state who just can't come and see the property. They'll come. We try to get them to come during the inspection period, because you can cancel for whatever reason. But even if they can't, they've at least had a better visual than just photos.
Just photos. I totally agree, and it's not the way we should go. And the other thing is, I gain a lot of insight often from driving my comps.
Yeah.
Because on paper, you might think these neighborhoods and subdivisions are all the same. And then you get out there. And I just had this late last week and I even put in my report, I got a lot of insight from driving these neighborhoods, because I noticed this street was different than this street.
Oh, yeah.
And this street had more architectural nuance than this street. And I made an adjustment for location that I would not have done if I was deprived the opportunity to do that inspection.
Yeah, and I think that happens a lot. I live in a Ralph Haver designed house. And
love that.
Yeah, and for those people that don't know, is a unique architectural style from the mid-century, and they sell for a premium.
Yep.
But if you're just comping it at a traditional, ranch style house, the value is going to be suppressed because you don't understand that it's different than what's surrounding it. And some of these areas are going through massive gentrification in Phoenix. And so one or two streets over, all of a sudden you've got, huge mansions, and then a couple streets down, it looks like you're, in the hood. So the change and the nuance, you don't get that if you send in a robot or some random person for you.
Yeah, I agree. And for you, as long as you own that Haver home, you need to be extra careful that you get an appraiser who understands that. Yeah. Because that's a geographical, that's a competency that most appraisers don't understand.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, so from our perspective, when we're helping sellers, we try to influence the appraisal the best we can. Now, I understand you can't, the days of greasing the wheels and doing all that stuff pre my day.
Right.
That was all pre-recession,
right.
Are gone. But the things that we do, and correct me if I'm wrong on my approach, but I try to schmooze and create a rapport with the appraiser.
Worth doing.
I know that we're working towards the same goal, that you're just a human being and we're not, fighting. And then I ask them politely if they mind if I send them comps.
Right.
And the market analysis I did to justify the valuation. So then I send them comps. I usually get some sort of list of updates and things, if there's been a brand new AC, new
Perfect.
roof, those things that might be hidden from an
Right.
appraiser when they're walking the property that absolutely influence the value. And then if there's something unique about the area, the home, the history, I also volunteer that information to kind of justify what we're doing. In addition to if we were, say, in a multiple offer situation,
Right.
I give them that information as well to just try and give them some sort of idea of what we're dealing with.
We teach a class, and it's a 3-hour class for credit called Understanding the Appraisal Process. And we give what I would call a toolbox to realtors, things that you should do. And you're checking like 6 of the 8 boxes right there. Like it's providing a list of upgrades, a chronological list of improvements done over time and potentially with the cost. Those things help me tell my story. Because at the end of the day, I have a story to tell about this property, and it might be an underwriter in Michigan who knows nothing about the market, and those bits of information help. I think that running comps is important. Here's your chance to try and teach competency. Sometimes you need that.
Yeah.
Sometimes it is not a cookie cutter neighborhood. It's a neighborhood that has nuances, and you either can say, I only want an appraiser who's geographically competent. I'm not going to let you in if you're not, or you can help with the mastery. You can help teach that. So I think you're doing a great job, and that's that level of professionalism we talked about. Congratulations.
What are the 2 that I was missing?
Well, so I am a big believer in making sure the right person's there for the job. And what I mean by that is I think the number one reason I see an appraisal with a flawed value is a lack of geographical competency. And I think it's a mistake as a realtor to just trust that whoever's calling you to get into your listing is competent for the job. And so I think that interviewing the appraisers ahead of time is really important. I really do. And I think part of that is you have to be really nice and professional, because sometimes appraisers are not going to like you asking them questions. We say, hey, we've never worked together before. Please don't be offended by this. All I'm trying to do is represent my client's best interests and make sure that I have an appraiser who really understands this neighborhood, because it's nuanced. Mm-hmm. And one of the questions I think is great to ask is, can you give me an idea what geographical boundaries you're going to use to look for comps? Because that's the critical issue.
Sure.
If you know the boundaries, you're fine. Like if you're in Arcadia, just a neighborhood that's very nuanced.
Yeah.
If you're in core Arcadia, you want the appraiser to be able to give you that 44th Street to Camelback to 68th Street to the canal north of Indian School Road. Because if they can't, and you're at 46th Street in Lafayette, and you go 4 blocks to the west, property values drop 15%, and your deal can get blown because of it. So I think that's important. I would recommend only working with certified appraisers. So that would be something that I would ask. There's trainees, there's licensed appraisers, which are lesser levels. Most appraisers are certified. At Apex, we only use certified appraisers, as far as I know. So I would want to do that.
So using certified, for the audience, the way that it kind of works, I don't get to choose who the appraiser is. It's all kind of independent and done blind. At least it's supposed to be. So you're getting a loan and you're working through the process, and then the lender's the one that contacts, 1-800 I'm an appraiser or whatever.
Yeah.
Right.
An appraisal management company.
Yeah,
usually,
and they then usually reach out to the listing agent to coordinate and schedule when they can get into the property and gain access, correct?
They assign, so the appraisal management company assigns an appraiser to the job, and then the appraiser will call typically the listing agent, although if you represent the buyer, you can request to be listed as the contact for access if you want to
Really?
be able to
Okay.
speak to them.
So that was going to be my next question is on the buyer side, we feel that we don't get to have any say at all. So should we be trying to influence it the same on the buy side as we are the sales side?
Influence makes me nervous.
I know,
I
right?
understand you can use that word. I'm not going to use that word.
I know.
But I think that you can tell the lender, I want to be the contact person for this. That's not going to always work because there's some appraisers who they're just generically, they're just going to call the listing agent. But it'll work a lot of the time.
Yeah.
And you're right. You're absolutely right. You generally don't have the ability to say, I want Jay Josephs to do this appraisal, although I'd like you to keep trying. But the difference is if you call up the lender and say, I don't think this appraiser's, or the appraisal management company or the appraisal desk, I don't think this appraiser's geographically competent. And here's why. I asked them the following questions, and if they knew my neighborhood, they'd be able to answer my school district, what high school district I'm in, those boundaries we talked about. They couldn't answer any of those questions. You now will know that they have a federal obligation to give you a geographically competent appraiser.
Okay.
Most of them, the way they meet that criteria is they put a note on the order form, hey, appraiser, if you're not geographically competent, you should turn this assignment down. That doesn't work.
Right.
So the process is flawed, and so most of the time, if you call the right person and say, I don't think this appraiser is geographically competent, here's why I feel that way, I'd like another appraiser assigned, they'll assign another appraiser to it. At Apex, we will.
Yeah.
That call might end up on my desk, and not only will I get you a new appraiser, as long as it's for the right reasons, competency, not he didn't promise he would hit my number, I will go into my assignment group and say, I need the best appraiser we have for this neighborhood. So it works most of the time. And that's great due diligence in terms of you representing your client's best interest. Because I know you're this type of person that you don't look at these deals, I just got to get these deals closed no matter what. You want to protect your buyers or sellers or whatever it is. And having an appraiser who understands your neighborhood is really part of protecting that client.
Absolutely. And for the audience, I mean, you need to demand that the agent that you're working with is doing these steps because it can mean a lot to the success of you closing on that property. Mm-hmm. Now, I wanted to ask some lenders, because you said asking if they're a certified appraiser. Now, I've heard that some of the big guys, in order to save money, are not using certified appraisers and are using those trainees and kind of cutting some of those corners, your Quickens, your Chases, those types of things. Is that true?
Maybe. Maybe. I wouldn't know because I'm certified, but yeah, I think that to me, if I were party to a transaction and the appraiser was either a trainee or only licensed, it would be a red flag for me. Yeah. And again, it's not an unreasonable thing because there's not many trainees, because there's not many people coming into this industry. And I think 75 to 80% of the appraisers are either certified general, which is more commercial, or certified residential. So it seems to me that it's a very reasonable demand to say, I want a certified appraiser. And again, we can, as having an interest in this company, it would be, our profit margins would go up if we went and hired licensed appraisers because we'd still charge the same amount, but we could pay the appraisers less. But I think the most important part of my process at the AMC is to find the right guy or person. And so that's imperative to me.
Yeah. I mean, I think all those are really important points that people should pay attention to. And it's important in this day and age with refinances too, not just home purchases. So you oftentimes will need an appraisal if you're doing a refinance. And it's kind of it should be the same process, right?
It should be. And I think for the most part it is. But the appraiser doesn't have the cheat sheet. You know what the cheat sheet is, right? The contract.
The contract.
We don't have a predisposed expectation. And it shouldn't matter. We've talked about that. But it does matter a little bit. Sure. And it's nice to kind of at least have an idea what somebody's expectation is. Doesn't mean I'll meet it, but at least I can look at it from that perspective and have a more educated decision. Yeah.
There's a demand at that price because it's under contract. When you're doing a refi, it's just whatever.
So on the refinance, knowing that the appraiser has no idea what the expectation is. That went away in 2009 when all the regulations changed. They stopped saying estimated value. I think it's important for the homeowner to provide comps and provide all the things that you
Agreed.
as the realtor
Yeah.
would do. Because again, otherwise the appraiser is going into it really blind
Yeah.
without the expectation.
And for our clients, if you're doing a refi, happy to do it. Just let
That's
us
awesome.
know. I will pull and do a market analysis for you on your property so that you can give that to your appraiser.
Realtor for a lifetime.
Yeah, that's that's right. So let's go a little bit deeper then. And so we've done an appraisal, and let's say that it does come in off. So it comes in lower than the value that we need it to. And so what should the steps be for
An appeal?
well, you can start there, but for either the agent or for the prospective buyer or the person refining, if they didn't get the valuation that they really think that they deserved.
Right. So in the class, we spend 90% of the time, 98% of the time talking about all the things to do on the front end, being proactive.
Yeah.
There are too many realtors out there, less now than 10 years ago, but there's too many realtors out there that say, hey, the house is vacant on lockbox. Go have fun. And then when the appraiser comes in low, then they start screaming and sending comps. It's not a fair fight once the appraisers finish the appraisal because they've signed their name to it. And the appraiser knows that there's potential consequences if they change their appraisal. Because what they're doing, if I change my appraisal, I'm admitting I've made a mistake.
Yeah, you have to
Okay?
admit that you're wrong.
Yeah, which nobody likes to do. That's a
No.
human
Yeah,
nature
yeah,
issue
right?
and an appraisal
Yeah.
issue. I've always believed, and I tell the appraisers that have worked for me, the industry is owed a level of professionalism, and part of that is looking at everything that comes in objectively. And if you made a mistake or you missed something or somebody has a point that you didn't consider, it's our job to consider it and give it fair consideration. But most appraisers don't want to do it. First, it's time consuming. You might provide me 3 comps or 4 comps, and now I have to do research on those comps. Or I could just say they weren't good comps and just move on. But the other thing, I won't go into the whole detail, but we had an appraiser make a $40,000 mistake on an appraisal. This is now 5 or 6 years ago, but it's so in my mind for a bunch of different reasons. Made a $40,000 mistake. After a 20-minute phone call, I convinced him that they made a big mistake. I provided data. I proved it. He changed the value. Contract price was met. Everyone was happy. But now as the owner of an AMC, I was faced with this decision. I have an appraiser on my panel who is capable of making a $40,000 mistake. And how do I feel about that?
Sure.
We took him off our panel. He's never done another appraisal for us. And prior to that assignment, he was billing us $80,000 a year.
Wow.
So he's doing a lot of appraisals for us. And I tell that story because it's in the back of most appraisers' mind. What if?
Yeah.
What if I missed a comp? What if I got the square footage wrong? What if I didn't give them credit for all their amenities? And so that's why it's really important to be proactive on the front end because appealing appraisals isn't a fair fight.
No, it's not.
That all being said, if you're going to appeal an appraisal, you want one of 2 outcomes. You either want the appraiser to see better data and see the error in their ways and change their existing appraisal, or you want the lender or the appraisal management company or whoever is in charge of oversight to look at the appeal and say, boy, there's so many mistakes here. And they might not all be material. Like he might say it has an alley and it doesn't have an alley. Or he might say it doesn't have gas, but it has gas. In terms of value, those aren't really impactful things. But if it's a combination that shows a level of carelessness, then maybe the appraiser's not credible and maybe you're entitled to a new appraisal. So you want one of those 2 outcomes.
Sure.
And so when you appeal an appraisal, hopefully you're finding better comps, but also any mistakes, any black and white mistakes you should point out. And maybe at the end you say, how can this appraiser be credible? Did he really give an industry standard of care that I deserve? And I just would like to start over with a new appraiser.
Yeah, I can think of one instance in the last 6 months, I think, where I did everything that I've said that I do. We were representing the seller, and we were under contract, I think, at $205. And our client was, every dollar mattered. He was kind of selling everything and moving out of country. And he needed all the money that he could get for this move and change in his life. And the appraisal came back at 200 even. So we were 5,000 under.
Right.
And he was upset, as he should be. And I read through line by line the entire appraisal. And the appraiser had valued swimming pools in the town of Maricopa at $20,000 a swimming pool.
It's a big adjustment for Maricopa.
And I was like, holy crap. It costs it costs $20,000 to $30,000 to just put in a pool. I could not believe the valuation that they gave.
Wait, you thought it was too low or too high?
Too high.
Okay, good.
In my estimation,
on that.
in my estimation, a pool probably adds about $10,000.
Depends on the neighborhood.
I know it depends.
But Maricopa's an entry-level neighborhood, and now you're giving 10% of the value of this property to a pool. That's probably too high. So now you're faced with having to prove he's wrong.
Yep. I appealed
How'd you do?
So I appealed it. They adjusted only $5,000. So they took every pool that they had valued at $20,000 down to $15,000. It changed the appraisal by to $1,000 more. So we then got it at $201,000. He still wasn't thrilled, but he's like, I really appreciate you going to bat for me. $1,000 is not a ton of money, but that makes a big difference to me. Yeah. And I was like, and I still think they're wrong. I think that there's no way that a pool in the town of Maricopa is valued at $15,000.
Right. You did it. So that's another thing. You did a great job for your client. And in those circumstances, the appraiser's kind of at an advantage in the sense that appraising's not black and white for the most part. Like you can say, I think he should have used this comp, but the odds are it's subjective. You know what I mean? And what you have to do in that scenario in the town of Maricopa, what you really have to do is prove you're right and he's wrong. And the way you generally prove that is you do the same geographical search, the same square footage search. Here's a data set with pools. Here's a data set without pools. And how much more are the ones with pools selling for? It's called paired sales analysis.
Okay.
But it's hard because the data, it's just not precise, and it's just hard. You're better off on the front end doing that. And one of the things you mentioned that I loved that most realtors don't do is realize that multiple offers mean something.
Yeah.
What we're trying to do as appraisers is say, in these market circumstances, how's the market going to react to the price? And multiple offers to me shows a really favorable reaction to the price. Sometimes that multiple offers leads to a final contract price that's inflated.
Sure.
But that means something to me. And so I don't need to see every page of the offer, but give me a few pages of it so I feel comfortable that it's a real offer. That matters to me.
Yeah. And I think on the listing agent side, it's their job to, in those situations, say, they may be offering you this much higher dollar amount, but there's no guarantee. We still have to get through that appraisal process. What I can guarantee is if it comes in lower than this, you are getting the max you possibly can for the value of your home today. Right. And when you kind of explain it that way, it's like, oh, okay, at least I'm getting the max that I possibly can get. I'm not going to be losing out on money.
So curious, on a situation like that where you have the listing and you get 4 offers, do you have to have that uncomfortable conversation where the seller thinks you priced it too low?
Oh, every time.
Okay.
Yeah. They're like, oh, we got multiple offers the first weekend. Do you think we priced it too low? No, I think I priced it super accurate, and the market saw that. And I'm of the belief, and I go into all my listing appointments saying this, is that I don't think you can price a home too low. If you price it too low, the market's generally going to see it, and you are going to get those multiple offers.
Especially now.
Especially in this market where there's a lack of inventory. Mm-hmm. I'm really good at getting those people to get their egos involved and start competing with each other to drive that price back up, getting them to go back and forth. So, at the end of the day, I do like the free market to a point that a home is ultimately worth what someone's willing to pay for it within reason.
Within reason. I agree with you. Cool. You got it.
Yeah, so I wanted to ask you too about a couple things. First, I think this is a quick one. How do you feel about Zestimates?
Zestimates have really encumbered my life and my lifestyle. Like, it's just, and I get it. If I were building a search engine, I would want to get as much traffic as I could to my site. And the best way to do it is be the bidder of good news every time. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And so I think Zestimates, for the most part, have created unrealistic expectations. And they cheat a little bit. Like, you can it'll have a Zestimate, and then as soon as the list price, as it goes on the market, I've seen Zestimates change dramatically to try and conform with the list prices. Look, I think there are computer-generated valuation models that are probably pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
I look at Zillow as one that's just purely to drive traffic to their site and makes people happy.
Yeah. I mean, their entire, I don't want to bash Zillow because I think
I just did.
I think their website's amazing. It's super user-friendly. It provides a ton of valuable data. They spent billions on making it, and the infrastructure is great. But if they're providing you something for free, who is the product? It's you, the consumer. You're the product. So they're not, I don't know, it's not all completely factual. You know, the houses that are always listed on there are probably under contract more often than not, especially in an environment like this. So, you know, one of the first things I do before going on a listing is I look at this estimate. I do my evaluation first, but then I want to know, odds are these people have done a bunch of research and they know what Zestimate says.
Yep.
So what am I going into? What am I walking into? Is it something that's way overvalued according to Zestimate? Is it under, which I love walking into those because then I'm like, oh, hey, surprise. You know, Zillow is way off that your home is worth $50,000 more. But then it kind of gives me an idea of what sort of scenario I'm walking into and how am I going to adjust my conversation because I know the information that the seller has.
So I'm going to give you a little scoop that's going to make me sound less credible for a minute. I sometimes look at Zillow too, but I do it after I'm done. We do a lot of private party work, estate work, divorce work, all this other cash purchases. And at the end of the day, it's good business to kind of understand your client's expectation.
Absolutely.
And I know that doing this long enough to know that there's a really good chance somebody in this transaction's looked at Zillow.
Oh, yeah.
And it never changes my opinion of value, but it changes the commentary that I put in there. And I've even acknowledged, I said, I understand that Zillow hazarded this, and here's what I've done, and here's my process, and here's why I think Zillow's wrong. I've actually done that before. Because it's so prevalent in our world. And I understand that it's a business, and what they want, ideally, they want somebody to go on that website and say, oh my goodness, my house is worth this much. Maybe I'm going to sell. What agents should I use? Zillow? And then they
or
make
should I
money
sell
that
to
way.
Zillow?
Or to Zillow now, yeah.
Now, yeah.
So I get it. It's a really important part of our world. I wish it didn't exist because I'm having to deal with other unrealistic expectations, which makes my job tough.
But it is nice that you go into the conversation. I mean, I think it's smart on your part because we know that the consumers are looking at it too. So then I want to talk about how consumers can generally look at comparables, how they should find comparables for their property, and kind of what that process looks like for you when you're comping out a house. I know that's a super detailed, probably way down a rabbit hole, but maybe
Well, so first, just so we're on the same page, if you're a homeowner, I don't know how you look for comps other than call you or call whoever your agent is to say I need the help. So if you have access to MLS, I'll tell you my process starts first very locationally centric. To me, location is the most important aspect of almost every house you'll see. And so my first searches are going to be really specific to the neighborhood, the subdivision, the historic district, whatever it is. And so the first search, I might not even put square footage parameters or year builds because I need to understand my location first. So my first will be my subdivision, and I'll do actives, pendings, and solds within the last year. Mm-hmm. An 11-month-old comp's not ideal, but if it's the only comp in my subdivision, it's my only frame of reference in my immediate location, it may have relevance to me. So that's my first search, and give me the best data. And listings have relevance too, because if the sales are supporting $400,000, but I can buy the same house for $375,000, the principal substitution says maybe it's not worth $400,000 anymore.
Yeah,
maybe we're in a declining market.
I use sold properties to tell us where we were, pending properties to tell us where we are, and active properties, again within reason, to tell us kind of where we're headed.
They're all relevant to pricing.
Yeah,
they're all relevant to pricing. Sometimes you're going to get a situation where, hey, there's no listings, and that means something. And that potentially, the laws of supply and demand, like that might mean you can get more money for your house. So my next search, after I'm really locationally specific, this is where that neighborhood boundaries question becomes so important when you ask the appraiser, is I look at the map. I don't ever do what's the 1 mile radius, because that's not how buyers look. They say, here's the neighborhood I want to be in. I want to be north of Indian School Road or east of 40th Street, whatever it is. I want to be in the Madison Meadows School District. So I start to narrow it down to the neighborhood, and then I'll be more specific on plus or minus 20% square footage, plus or minus 10 years, or whatever it is. So that's my next search. Give me the best stuff where the houses are similar within my neighborhood. And then my third, fourth, fifth searches, depending on the uniqueness of the property, is now I'm looking at the house specifically. What's unique, special, different about this house that warrants an additional search? Does it have a basement? If so, I want to search for basement comps. If it's on a lake or if it's on a golf course, I want to do a search for lake and golf course comps. If it backs high-tension power lines or a busy street, that's important. All the things that impact marketability, I want to do a separate search for that. If it's a brand new fix and flip remodel, at the end of all my other searches, I want to know what the premium is for remodeled homes. So I want some remodeled comps.
You're really looking to compare apples to apples.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And in that process, where maybe it's 4 or 5 searches all told, I'm covering my bases on location, on neighborhood, and on the house. And at the end of that, my appraisals typically have 7 or 8 comps. And so I narrow it down to the best, maybe 6 closing and 1 or 2 pendings or actives. And that's how I develop the appraisal.
How do you account for price adjustments? Do you assign a general valuation for things like a pool, a 3-car garage versus a 2-car garage? Do you ever compare 2-story homes to single-story homes?
Yep. Really good questions. And so first, and the bummer, Danny, for you and for anybody who's watching us, I don't have a chart. I don't have a chart that says a pool's worth $10,000 or $15,000, because what I learned, it took me about 6 months in the appraisal industry to figure this out, and I've been doing this like 30 years now, is it's very neighborhood specific. Mm-hmm. A 5th bedroom might have more value in a Mesa neighborhood than it would in some other neighborhood. The exact same pool in Paradise Valley is not worth the same as that exact same pool in Maryvale. And so the adjustments are supposed to be what a typical buyer in this neighborhood would be willing to pay for the amenity. Mm-hmm. And so whereas I think the lower tiered appraisers kind of go in there and say, okay, a garage is worth $7,500, a pool's worth $15,000, a bathroom's worth $4,000, no matter what, no matter where. The good appraisers really have their eyes wide open to see what the market here is doing and how the market's reacting, because it's different.
It is.
A golf course adjustment could be $100,000 in a neighborhood, and it could be $10,000 in a neighborhood. Siding a busy street in some neighborhoods might be $10,000, but in other neighborhoods it could be $150,000.
Yeah.
So it's real. That's where that whole geographical competency is important. Again, it's not just using the comps in the right neighborhood. It's understanding how the buyer, the typical buyer in our neighborhood's reacting to things. Mm-hmm. Really critical.
And then when I'm comping something out, I never compare single story to 2-story. Is that a fair statement?
Never is a really strong word in my business.
Sure.
And it's the same as when somebody says, I can't do that. That means they won't do that, because there's really few rules as to what the appraiser can and can't do. It's really subjective. So when I'm a 2-story house, one of my searches is for 2-story comps. But if I have a scenario where the 3 most recent sales in my subdivision are all 1-story, I might use them. And then I'll go and find the best 2 stories. And then part of my process should be, how much is the premium paid for a 1-story versus a 2-story? And then I'll adjust the 1 stories down. Mm-hmm. So I don't think it's terrible business practice to only use 1 stories to 1 stories and 2 stories to 2 stories. But sometimes that's precluding you from missing the really good locational data.
Sure.
And again, location's a big emphasis to me. So If I do use a 2-story when I'm comparing it to a 1-story, part of my process is to really try and see how this market is reacting to the 2 stories versus the 1 stories. And sometimes it's more than one issue, because sometimes those 2 stories have a more dramatic view, where the 1 story doesn't have any view, but if you're up on the second level, you've got a view, and that might partially offset the stair aspect of it.
Very first time in 12 years of real estate, we have a buyer client that only wants 2-story homes.
Yeah, super unusual. Why?
Yeah.
Fitness buff, likes the stairs.
Yeah.
Good for the Fitbit.
Yeah, they just like 2 stories. They
Interesting.
and that's all they want. And I'm like, okay, you're the first person I've ever helped that said that.
Yeah, I that's one of the things when we talk to realtors, it's about demand.
Yeah.
Demand control is so important to think.
It's usually I'll take either, or I only want single story.
Absolutely.
It's the first time. What about square footage? So there's the smaller the square footage, the higher the price per square foot.
Good. Yep.
The larger the house. So there's an inverse relationship in price per square foot and the square footage of the home. So how do you kind of adjust for that?
Okay, glad you're not even looking at your notes. This is super impressive, Danny.
Half these questions aren't even on here.
That's true. I'm ill prepared for this. No,
sorry.
I get this all the time. And so one of the reasons I started a real estate school, and one of the reasons I teach that class, Understanding the Appraisal Process, is I got so sick of meeting the realtors out at properties and them talking about price per square foot. I get it. In your world, that's really important. It's a capsulated way to come up with a value on a property. And
it's a lazy way to come up with a value for a property.
Okay, you say that. I don't disagree. But I understand that. Buyers use it, sellers use it, realtors use it. That's your world. The problem is appraisers don't use it. Mm-hmm. And so when the realtor shows up to meet me at the property and everything about their story is price per square foot, I nod and I smile and I act like I'm listening, but I'm not, because it doesn't matter. And the reason it doesn't matter is, let's say we're in a neighborhood that's selling for $200 a square foot, meaning sales price divided by the square footage, $200 a square foot. What we have to agree to is that included in that $200 a square foot are views, the value for views, value for lot size, value for bathrooms, value for bedrooms, fireplaces, garage, pools, covered patios, landscaping, right? Mm-hmm. When we are doing our appraisal, and if you're looking at the appraisal grid, you're going to see separate adjustments for all those things. So we're breaking all of those aspects out of the price per square foot figure. And so when I'm finally sitting there and I'm trying to figure out what each additional square footage is, how it's impacting value, it's not $200 anymore, because I'm peeling all those layers of the onion away. And so when I isolate just square footage, maybe it's $80 a foot. And so this isn't a fair formula. I don't use it. Appraisers don't use it. But maybe to give you a ballpark, appraiser might adjust square footage at like 40% of what a neighborhood's selling for, where you're at $200 a foot. And so what a lot of your industry thinks is 100 extra square feet's worth $20,000. But to the appraiser, we're not taking 100 times $200 a foot. We might be taking that by $80 a square foot, because we're adjusting all these other factors separately. And then the realtor that is comparing, we're 2,000 square feet and they're giving me 1,200 square foot comps, and they're saying, here's what this sold for, price per square foot. Like you alluded to, bigger houses sell for less. Mm-hmm. On a price per square foot basis, they cost less to build because you're amortizing administrative costs and you have economies of scale. So it's not that $200 number. It's really important, because realtors, if they're basing a value opinion solely on that price per square foot basis, they're not speaking the same way an appraiser speaks, and you're more at jeopardy of a transaction going south because the appraiser.
Well, homeowners should know that if someone's doing that, they're not very good at their job. No offense, but they're probably not that good of an agent if they're solely relying on a price per square foot to value out your home.
I think that, again, it's about, when you're dealing with a client, it's about managing expectations and educating the client. And I do think a critical conversation probably should be, we need to talk about price per square foot. I'll talk to you about it sometimes, but here's the weaknesses about that. Mm-hmm. And you kind of give double credit for things if all you care about is price per square foot, because we're giving you credit for the pool separately and then also in this dollar per square foot figure. So I think it's part of educating a client. You're the professional, you're the eyes and ears, and you're the protector of your client. Giving them a better understanding about how the market really reacts to square footage is essential.
And I've also been told that landscaping has nothing to do with the value of a property. Would you?
I don't agree. In fact, the appraisal I finished this morning before I left for my inspections, I made landscaping adjustments. I don't think landscaping upgrades are great investments. I say that as my wife's installing synthetic grass as we speak right now at a price way too high above the contributory value of synthetic grass. But I think it's wrong to say landscaping has no value, because again, our job as appraisers is how does the market react to that? And I've seen it. I've seen when I'm looking at the photos of the backyards of these comps, and one has basic gravel and one has pavers and fire pits and banco seating and barbecues, and there's premiums paid for that. So it's my job as the appraiser to get it right.
Yeah.
But you're right. That happens way too often. The appraiser's not looking at the landscaping package.
It's just not a dollar for dollar return, which
Probably
most upgrades that you do to your home is not a dollar for dollar return, right?
Yeah, I generally agree with that. I think that the keys to get the biggest bang for the buck, upgrade consistently. Like if you've got $20,000, that's all you have just at your discretionary income, and you can only afford to do the master bathroom, that's probably a bad investment, because all that does is a buyer goes around and they see the bathroom, like that's cool, and then they see the rest of the house, which doesn't look as nice. Same with the kitchen. So I think that you want to be kind of consistent in your process, because sometimes an upgraded kitchen is really nice, but if you have to walk across shag carpet or vinyl floors to get to it, it almost makes the rest of the house look worse. So upgrading consistently, I think, is important. Curing the deficiencies, so if you've done some really nice work over here, but you haven't done this room or this room, those are deficiencies to me. And then things to bring your house up to the norm for the neighborhood, I think, will tend to get you a greater return than doing maybe a super adequacy.
What, solar has been a big push, recently. And I've argued for a very long time that I personally believe that solar leases are a terrible deal and that no one should do them.
Great.
And so when it comes to solar, is there a value add to the home if you own it? And is there a value add to the value? I'm repeating myself, but to a lease. Yeah. So does a solar lease add value to a property, and does if you own it, does it add value?
This is super easy. So appraisers are kind of at the mercy of what lenders tell us to do. Lenders have a huge lobby influence. We have no lobby influence. So sometimes the way appraisals go are how lenders want them to go. And so lenders came out years ago and said, we don't want you to give any value for lease solar systems. So that's it. And I was at one in Mesa today, and I saw the solar panels, and they said it's leased, and there's going to be no value given for that. I generally agree, and it sounds like you do also. I don't think there's contributory value to a leased solar system where they're making monthly payments on that. Where I disagree, and I'm kind of bummed that the industry has taken a hard stance on this, is sometimes you see those prepaid solar leases. Like Shea Homes they're including solar. They included solar in some neighborhoods, but they didn't own them outright. They were prepaid leases, so the maintenance was covered. So it's actually a really good thing. You're not having any costs, and you're getting a benefit, and your maintenance covered. The problem is the industry says that is a lease system, and we don't want you to give it any value. So I don't give it any value. I think there might be circumstances like that where you can buy out the lease for a very small amount of money, and you lose the maintenance, but at least it would have value. I think owned solar systems have value. I'd like to even say in every case, because I think there's the way appraisers normally interpret value is find other sales with that amenity and see how the market reacted in the past. With solar systems, that's still our first goal is let me find solar comps that have with owned systems and see how the market reacts, what kind of premium it pays. But if you can't find that, you can do a financial analysis. What's the present value of this energy savings over an extended period of time?
Sure.
So I think there's value to solar systems. It depends on the neighborhood, the array, the efficiency of the system, probably somewhere in the $5,000 to $15,000 range, depending.
Sure. And so just to kind of, probably one of my last questions is, so you have an appraisal done. It sounds like you do a ton of research to come up with a valuation. How long from the day that you go out and inspect the property to when you're finished and can present that to the underwriter? What's that turnaround time look like?
Really good question. And I tend to be busier than most. So
sure, I'm sure. You sound like you're really good at what you do.
Thank you. I do take a little longer. I would say the average process start to finish after inspections is like 48 hours. And I think that's a pretty common lender expectation. I know in our appraisal management company that we want to know when you've done the inspection, and 48 hours, we kind of want to see the report. For me, sometimes they might schedule me on 4 inspections a day. And so I might have 3 days where I'm out in the field almost all day. And so sometimes it might take me 4 or 5 days or even longer, depending on the complexity. But again, we try and work off the client's expectation.
Sure. Should a seller, when they're under contract and they know the appraiser's coming out, and I've called them and said, hey, Jay's going to be out. He's going to appraise your property, and he's coming out on Thursday at 9:00. Is there anything they can do between today and Thursday to make their property shine to help the appraisal process?
Yeah. So first, and we've talked about this before, my opinion is you should be there. You're the expert. You're going to run the comps, and there's something beneficial of a face-to-face interaction with a professional like you that you could kind of highlight, hey, there's a couple things about this house that make it special. This is feedback I've been getting as I've been here for showing. So I think that for the most part, you should be here when you can. I would just prepare like you would prepare when a potential buyer was coming out. I like to say it doesn't matter that a house is clean. It shouldn't matter. It generally doesn't matter. But if it looks nicer, it shows nicer, it might have more value. Yeah. I've been to houses that smell like tuna fish. I'm like, oh, do you really have to eat tuna? Cigarettes are awful.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think there's things you can do. Keep your house clean, turn the lights on, make sure that, the landscaping's maintained. I'd like to say it didn't make a difference because those are kind of superficial items, but I think they do. Okay. Just like they do to a buyer.
Yeah.
So yeah, you could prepare.
Fair enough. So is there anything that you wanted to touch on that maybe I didn't cover?
Man, I don't know. You did great. You did great.
Thanks.
Yeah, I think we covered a lot.
Yeah, I think we covered a lot too. I have no idea how long this podcast has been, but I think we got a lot of really good information.
Yeah, no doubt, Danny. It's fun.
So I do like to wrap everything up with some Phoenix-based questions. So with you, having traveled the Valley a ton, what's your favorite restaurant in Metro Phoenix?
All right. So I would be lying if I didn't at least mention Wildflower Bread Company. And I have a better answer than this, but I eat at Wildflower like 6 days a week to the point where for birthdays and Hanukkah and bar mitzvahs, people just give me Wildflower gift cards. So I just expect those. But when we go out as a family or we go out with friends, I'm a huge Sicilian butcher guy. Have you ever eaten there?
Yeah.
Yeah, I really like it. It's a Tommaso's restaurant, I think, and they do a great job. We're lucky because we're in a market with a ton of great restaurants, but that happens to be one that comes to my mind.
I'm real sad that Sam Fox sold out to Cheesecake Factory.
I doubt he's sad.
I don't know. I just, you go to those restaurants and the smaller guys to avoid going to a restaurant that you're looking through an encyclopedia of food. Yeah. And I just hope that Cheesecake Factory doesn't change what made the Fox restaurants so kind of unique. And I think the Fox restaurants really sparked that restaurant revolution that's taken place in Phoenix.
Yeah. I think he's a good guy too. And I like pretty much all his restaurants. I was shocked. I didn't know that was in the works.
Yeah. Good for him. I hope he made, hundreds of millions of dollars.
He did.
Yeah. Are there any exciting places that you've discovered lately?
Yeah. So we took, for the first time in my life, a 2-week vacation. I've never taken a 2-week vacation. What I've learned is it takes me a week to start enjoying myself.
Yes.
We went to Telluride, Colorado in the summer. And I don't know if this was a Phoenix question, but if you've never been to Telluride, Colorado in the summer, I highly recommend it. We've always gone there to ski. And the hiking and the scenery and the wildlife, like it was spectacular.
beautiful.
Absolutely was. So that would be that was my revolution. I never wanted to go there in the summer because I'm like, I only ski. What am I going to do?
Yeah.
But it was
they have great mountain
place.
biking.
Yeah, tons of mountain biking.
Off 4-wheel driving, and
It's
yeah, it's
special
cool.
place.
What is your favorite neighborhood in Metro Phoenix?
You know, so I'm kind of a Paradise Valley guy. I live on like the Phoenix Paradise Valley border. So I love Paradise Valley and all it offers. But I have to say, like, the family aspect of Arcadia is pretty cool. We've always had good friends that live in Arcadia, and you go over there at like 6 o'clock and there's kids playing in the yards, and you might not see your kid for like hours, which sometimes is good, sometimes is bad. But everyone knows each other. Like, there's something really cool about that neighborhood to me.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I think a lot of people are out walking their dogs, riding their electric whatever they have.
It's
their,
neat.
Their one wheel if you're Skylar, or your electric scooters all around Arcadia with their kids. So
it's awesome.
I agree. What about your favorite hangout spot in the valley?
We live pretty close to Tatum and Shea, and I kind of like Oso. Like, we've got
That's right next to my house.
Oh, is that right?
I'm on Shea in the 51.
Okay,
That's the Haver neighborhood.
I totally know where you are. South side of Shea.
Yep.
Probably don't want to tell everybody. So we have a Bernese Mountain Dog and a Husky, and just to go there with the dogs and have a beer at the end of the day. I like it. I also belong to the Village on Camelback. I'm an avid tennis player.
Yeah.
And sitting in that lounge, staring up at Camelback Mountain after a 3-set match is pretty cool too.
Very nice, very nice. And then, what is your favorite Arizona site to see?
I love Camelback Mountain. I love Camelback Mountain.
Yeah.
It makes me sad when I see appraisals where they're not giving value to a Camelback Mountain view because they just don't understand. They haven't stared at it in the mornings. They haven't stared at it at sunset. Like, I drive by there all the time, and it's just, it's the preeminent thing to take somebody to when they're in from out of town doing that hike. So, yeah, I think I'm pretty passionate about Camelback Mountain.
We're very lucky that it's like right in the middle of the city.
It is.
Yeah.
It's totally in the middle.
Yeah.
And I live like right at the Phoenix Mountain Preserve. So I do love to just take off when it's raining and go running in those trails. So I love that also. But Camelback, there's just something awesome about it.
Very cool. Well, if anyone wants to reach out to you, if they want to order an appraisal, or if they just have general appraisal questions, how do they get a hold of you?
Thanks for asking. Our office, Josephs Appraisal Group, 602-955-4050. Great staff will take care of you, and they'll forward you to my cell phone if it's a question I can help you with. I'm happy to do it. We do it all the time.
We'll make sure to put your contact information in the show notes
Danny.
as well. So
you've been great.
Thank you.
No notes. I'm super impressed.
Well, I really appreciate this. This has been very educational for me. I hope it was educational for our audience. So thank you guys for tuning in, and we will see you next time.